So, info dump. With the evolution of language, which I believe to be a result of natural processes that happen with or without human existence, whether or not we are aware of these processes, they're happening. Uh, Evolution. We are bound to them in a sense. We are arguably, I would personally argue that we are free from them to an extent as well. I know that seems diametrically opposed, if that's the word that I'm trying to say. It's complicated. It's not that complicated, but if you aren't aware of something, is it really holding you back? I mean, in a lot of cases, yes. But freedom, I mean, the inevitability of being alive since you're already alive is like, in a sense, a restriction of freedom itself. So anyway, pipe tobacco. I'm thinking about a few things, and I wanted to express explicitly ontogeny. Ontogeny? No. Uh, uh, I basically came to the conclusion that personal experiences um, personal experiences relate to uh, I don't know. The point of this video was basically to say one thing and then kind of develop a philosophy around it. And uh, the existence of a process that is universal um, is kind of the point of science, you know, and a lot of art that I've seen depicts imagery, you know, or portrays concepts. So I'm thinking about musical ideas and the similarities between lyrical content and sound arrangement, like guitar, drums, whether it's a soft sound. And I'm thinking about vectors. And so my limitation, my farthest reach in the scientific section of life is hyperbolic geometry and brain processing of visual information, for example, and specific branches of quantum physics or quantum field theory, whatever you want to call it, which studies the very, very small world, the world of particles that make up the ones that you can see. And there it is, how do the things that govern them, which seem to be the fundamental building blocks of everything that exists in the material realm, if we can understand those laws well enough, we should be able to know more about the world, And so these vectors or these fields, I think there's congruences of things that normally don't interact. And we have concepts like dark matter and hallucinations that are, and even virtual particles. And some would even throw light into this category, ironically enough, as unavoidable as it is. Particles and stuff that don't have mass, or that don't interact with mass, or that don't interact with, baryonic material, which is pretty much everything. Although it's not, because there's more dark matter, I believe, in the universe than there is matter. So that's a perplexing idea. And I have my own theories specifically on why we can't see dark matter and how we can actually see past it. But I'm thinking there's a connection between the human brain and the fundamental nature of existence. If there is a fundamental nature of existence, there might not be. What if that there's not? But then in the case, if that was a provable fact, then that it's equally as good. It's equally as important. I read, these flies are bothering me. I read that, and I'm gonna have to look into this because I don't want to spread misinformation, but I read that people now have evidence or proof even that nature tends to lean and progress through increasingly intricate patterns of branching patterns that sort of pull things towards them. In my opinion, if you look at a tree and consider its leaves, and then consider the veins on the leaves, and then look at the system, as you get farther away towards the edge of the leaf, I would say, they get smaller and there becomes more space available for them to go. That seems to be a fundamental law of nature, according to these scientists. And there's an implication that action in space, which every action takes place in space as far as one section of what we know of life is concerned, creates more space. So the canvas gets bigger as you fill it, which circles back around to the inevitable existence of life since you're already alive, and the implications of that as well. But when you combine these things, all right, one more thing before I go. I was looking at a ketchup splatter on a cutting board in the sink, and I was thinking to myself, if we consider this platter in its flatness and two-dimensional glory as a straight, flat surface that exists in this situation, and we notice this pattern, I think what happened is hey, hi, interesting looking comment. Let me read that. Oh, it's fading away. Dang. I'm looking at this pattern of this ketchup, and I just happened to notice this. And it was unique, yet ambiguous in nature, to the point of maybe not having a specific meaning based on its shape and, visual thing. It wasn't like the face of Jesus in toast or whatever. But that's the point, is the action of me spilling the ketchup was linear motion, and the existence of this cutting board implies, when the ketchup lands on the cutting board, the pattern that emerges, seems to not have any information in it. It's not a thing you can look at and see. It's like there are two sections of reality crossing here. The geometry of a straight line or a linear motion, like gravity, and the ambiguity, or maybe the existence of ketchup and the cutting board, imagining it as a two-dimensional surface. I mean, it's not like I put a perfectly straight trajectory with a perfect amount of ketchup and a predictable amount of force to repeat a process that might produce a pattern, but I see things sometimes, like in clouds, for example, that are so defined and undeniable in nature as a visual representation of something other than a cloud. You know what I mean? Patterns in the clouds that are so real looking. So I'm just going to I'm going to get back to that comment. I don't know if I can actually pull it up. Oh, wow, it just popped up. Okay, I'm guessing this person has commented again to make it pop up. Ah, I got it. Very interesting. Generated. I see. I wonder where this took place. I'm wondering. I watched a video of Terence McKenna in the jungle like an hour ago. So Yes, that's great comment. What a great comment. I'm trying to think if I've referenced psychedelics yet. But I was about to. I'm about to. This video from this place. I might post a comment in the links, or I mean a link in the comments. But it's called Qualia Institute, Qualia Research Institute, and the term qualia, to my knowledge, from a Vsauce video, indicates like a word, for example, that can trigger a direct stimulus. You know, like a measurable, undeniable information that is passed from person to person, like a visual experience or something represented in this exchange, something like that, which I think is interesting because it's not a term that many people are familiar with or that I think about often, but I heard in this video a few years ago, and then that's what this place is called. They're involved with Harvard and MIT and people who remain anonymous for obvious reasons, and this speech takes place, I believe, at Harvard campus. In the audience, 90% of the people, they do a survey real quick, and 90% or so are experienced with firsthand use of psychedelics. These people now are thinking that hyperbolic space, hyperbolic geometry, the DMT realm, level 6, whatever you want to call it, they're mapping out the experience or the space that you can get to on breakthrough levels or even sub-breakthrough levels, quantifying it, and they've found some really interesting things involving geometry, which can be relevant to a lot of different aspects of life, I guess. There are 17 possible combinations of... I'm no expert or anything like that, but I believe the point is there's a finite amount of combinations that you can fill up any surface with, if you're talking about shapes. So things get complicated because you look at a head of lettuce and there's no flat surface on it. So people started wondering about curvature and stuff. If you overload information into a system, usually the first time that happens, it's a bug or a glitch, like in computers, something will happen. But in that example, people find ways to write code in video games by breaking elements of the game, which is really just an idea. A video game is just a culmination of codes, that are influenceable in the sense that you pick and choose which one goes where with your action. So it's almost like getting access to an alternate version or alternate space in the game of life. Your brain normally processes in a way that is best adapted for survival. This is probably changing on an evolutionary level for humans because of machines and convenience and things like that. And I did mention Terence McKenna's philosophies on this DMT topic. it could be so that in order to progress as life in this arrangement of reality, if our goal is to seek eternal life outside of the possibility of beyond death, you know, there's no way it's going to happen here in this physical realm, because the limits of time, the restraints of inevitable nothingness at the very end of time. Unless we're all wrong, completely fundamentally wrong about so many things, there is going to be a heat death. There's going to be an inevitable heat death. One thing I saw recently was, and this might go with my theory, one thing that I saw recently was involving a subset of quantum physics. I was talking with somebody trying to explain the idea that potentially there are these things that exist that they're calling participes. I can't believe I just remembered that. I couldn't the past 3 times I've talked about this. Participes that carry reality, that carry the building blocks of reality, like light, and the only ones that matter to us in daily life right now are those ones, the ones that actually carry the light particles to their destination. You know, maybe there are some that don't, so we don't interact with them. I forget the name of that branch of quantum physics. It's called something really, it has a really simple sounding name, a really boring sounding name. But the exciting thing, I guess, is that, if there is anything exciting about this, is that, you know, well, first of all, assuming that there's a heat death, the only way to be immortal in this physical world as a human that's already alive. Now, why entertain this concept? Why entertain it at all? I mean, if virtual spaces, you know, if other realms are real enough to be a common factor in multiple people's lives to a point where they can interact, then it seems possible to escape the physical world as yourself into a place that is not restricted by Euclidean geometry, Euclidean space, surfaces that have a maximum amount of shapes that can fit in them. So the same laws that govern Euclidean and hyperbolic geometry govern DMT visuals. At least the geometric aspects of the visual experiences. That's a better way to put that. Big distinction, because psychedelic experiences, you know, the visual side is hallucinogenic, and many beginners or people who are not very well informed don't discern between geometry and things like entities or hallucinations, classical hallucinations like fish or, symbols or stuff like that. Psychedelic geometry is like repeating patterns and stuff like that. So I did mention the art. So many tangents I could go on. I forget, I was getting to the exciting thing. What was the point of this? It would be kind of like the movie that I don't want to well, I'm not even monetized or anything like that, but the show Upload, where they put their consciousness in a computer, essentially. So when you say, like I said earlier, that machines, machinery is probably influencing human evolution, speeding it up, and then you immediately apply DMT experiences, you come to the conclusion, if you are aware of elves. Speaking of geometry, there seems to be a common theme among psychedelic experiences, and that seems to be a duality between patterns and symmetry, visually discernible things from everyday life. Things like straight lines, things like bright flashing colors that aren't in nature. You can tell psychedelic geometry when you see it. It's always different, be it abides in the beginning of an experience or during a low-level experience, to the laws of Euclidean geometry. When you surpass those levels, what you see abides to the laws of hyperbolic geometry. But the thing about hyperbolic geometry is it's like the laws they're not as restrictive. There's much more freedom. It would be like overloading your computer. What do they call that when you overload the hard drive or whatever, and it runs at 10 times the speed, can calculate so much more information at once. And there's evidence that your body is actually perceiving things better. Maybe, better in the sense more detailed, more realistic, more accurately as far as their existence goes. I don't know how else to describe that. As someone who's personally experienced, quote unquote enhanced vision, but it either turns into something much more or, goes away so quick that it, due to caloric costs and the fact that in everyday life it's not necessary, to sacrifice that much energy to be able to see a tiny little bit better. Anyway, there's a duality between sentience, life, people, dogs, cats, and infinitely complex geometric things that make sense. I wish I could go back and watch the beginning of this or get like stenographer to type up like the world's quickest summary of what I've said so far to try to relate it all and end the video. I can't think back on 29 minutes and try to pick anything more from it. I don't think. I've probably wrung everything dry. But I'm gonna shout out Josie Kins, which is a channel on YouTube that has a lot of really helpful information. Josie, Josie Kins. And basically what we've discovered, hypothetically, in my humble opinion, not me at all. No. This is my YouTube channel where I talk about stuff that might not even be real. According to something that I haven't even looked into yet, nature has a tendency towards patterns, which is kind of seems juxtaposed to the idea that nature tends towards chaos, which is what everybody thinks the second law of thermodynamics, chaos theory, increasing intricacy. The thing about increasing intricacy is it's a less accurate way to even describe. So right now, tending towards a more stable or a more, let's say, uniform display of energy, which is the main theory behind chaos theory. From where we are right now, tending towards, white noise, essentially, would look like an increase in patterns, an increase in the intricacy of patterns. So I believe this would open a new door towards exploring these specific patterns, understanding them, trying to find them in life, and then that would really just change things up. I mean, think about like the concept of pareidolia. Why would humans have a brain functionality that says, oh, that's a face? It's so easy for our mind to see a face where there is no face. What would be the functionality? So if nature is tending towards patterns, I mean, patterns is one word. It's a vague summary of what is probably a more complex law of nature, according to these claims. But I immediately, when I read this, I thought, double slit experiment. I thought of bands of light and synchronous, like in a spaced out evenly. But the thing about the bands is that they're brighter in the middle. You know what I'm saying? They're more concentrated towards the center, but there's no straight line up and down. So the bands are obviously there and discernible from the space between, but each band seems to get more vague as you go away from the center. And so this seems to be a fundamental way that things in the quantum world function. I mean, if you think about the position of an electron, the closer you get to its position, the farther away you get, the more it goes. You try to predict its trajectory. Now, it's like, you can't know its trajectory because its speed affects, it's all. So things seem to tend towards each other. So I'm talking earlier about these congruences, these bands of light, which insinuate a sea of light, in essence. I mean, waves instead of particles changes how you think about other things. Yet there seem to be intersections of finite finality, such as the ketchup landing on the plate in the ambiguous pattern, um, congruences that have undeniable consequences or effects on the future and stuff. I'm thinking about elves again in the archetypal sense of good versus evil. It seems like a concept they would prefer to ignore. From what I hear, maybe overwhelm you with joy until you look at their little toys long enough for them to be happy enough to go continue and make someone else some toys. Angels and demons, the problem with life on earth is that there's so much struggle, that we have internalized a necessity for struggle. And now evil people are using that to their advantage. It's very unfortunate that your boss and the governor of some country on the other side of the world has benefited from the internalized false idea of necessity for struggle. When there's a surplus of resources for everyone, thank you for watching, person from earlier. I don't know if you're still there. I'm looking at the reflection in my eyes. There's a lot of info to put together, try to find meaning and stuff or whatever. Anyway, I guess I have nothing else to say. So